I'd like to introduce our guest speaker for this evening, gentleman to my right here named Duncan Klett. He got his start here in Ottawa in high tech in Nortel, or maybe it was called Bell Northern Research back in the day. Hopefully not Bell Labs, that would be going back a long way. And Mitel, in fact, which is where he crossed paths for the first time with Terry Matthews. And Duncan now is 34 years into co-founding and running a company here in town called Kinaxis, who has become a real, I use the word with no disrespect, under the radar success story. More than 500 employees, growing in a very, very healthy way, leading the industry, which Duncan will tell you about, I'm sure, in terms of supply chain management software. And Duncan's agreed to walk us through his journey of an entrepreneur over 34 years building a local success software company. So without further ado, Duncan Klett, co-founder of Kinaxis.
So while I'm just getting, okay, the mic's going, that's good. And while I'm just getting things going here, I should say two things. First of all, well, three things. Thanks for coming, appreciate the nice audience tonight. Second thing is, you've actually got the wrong person speaking here. I want to draw attention to Mike Cahy, the founding president of what's now Kinaxis, who's sitting in the third row. I don't know, you can hold your hand up or something, people who don't know you. And of the three founders that I'll talk about in a minute, I'm the only one that didn't have the sense to know when it was time to leave. But anyway, so going to talk a little bit about Kinaxis. The other thing I would say is if I just rattle through the presentation, we'll all be home and out of here before 7. But I'm really hopeful that there'll be lots of questions, and then we will have the challenge of cutting it off at the end rather than boring everybody to tears. I'm going to spend the next 14 minutes reading the safe harbor statement. Basically, it says don't do any trades based on whatever I might say. I can also say that I do not have anything to do with the operation of the company in terms of financials or anything like that. What I do is I live in the product, and I work with our customers and our field organization to make sure it all works. So I really can't tell you, I don't think I can tell you anything I'm not supposed to, because I don't know anything I'm not supposed to. But anyway, we've done that. So, little story about us. We started in 1984, so I was saying to Steve, that's 34 years ago. And the next couple of slides are some pictures, so you'll see how old I look then. I kind of like to tease. I was saying we are going to be an overnight success after 20 years of hard slogging. Actually, it took 30 years of hard slogging before we became an overnight success, but success is nice. And I could also say it's been a great ride, but I still actually work for the company, so it is a great ride, and it continues as a great ride, and I will talk some more about that. We had some names, Cadence Computer, Carp Systems, Enterprise Planning, Web Plan. I think people who are starting their own company, the thing that worried us the most when we literally sat around a card table, the three of us, John Peacock, Mike Cahy, and myself, on August 1st of '84, was two things. What have we done, and how do we keep this secret before somebody else steals our ideas and beats us to the market? The interesting thing is, in our case, after 34 years, really nobody does quite what we do. At least we believe that. I guess you have to keep believing that. So it's been interesting. I mentioned to some of you, my son has been involved with a startup. They announced a month ago what they were up to. And they were also deathly afraid for 4 years that the world was going to figure out what they were doing. So I think it's not unusual that that's how people feel. Okay. So what do? We provide software as a service now to typically large companies to help them manage their supply chain. I'm going to flip through a few of these as it builds up. The numbers in manufacturing, we tend to sell to companies that make stuff and then sell it. Now, whether they actually make it or they contract out to make it, that depends. But the numbers involved, you say them, And before I say them, I always do a little mental check and think, is that the right number? That can't be the right number. For example, one company I've been doing a lot of work with for the last decade makes chips. Well, they don't actually make them. They design and market chips. When I started working with them, they were doing about 6 million chipsets a week, which I thought, that's a lot of chips. That's a lot of stuff. They now do more than 3 million chipsets a day, and they basically don't touch any one of them. Another company makes appliances. They make like 5,000 refrigerators a week. And you think, who is buying 5,000 refrigerators a week? For heaven's sakes, you can make a line of these things end to end from their plant to our offices in Ottawa, and you'd have a few left over. Like, just phenomenal numbers. So, as Steve said, the three of us who started the company were at Mitel when it was a PBX company. It now is a PBX company again, having done a few twists in the middle. Terry's not here, so I don't have to be so careful. And so our background was high-tech electronics, and so our first area that we sold into high-tech electronics. So things like Flextronics, Flex, contract manufacturer, Plexus is a contract manufacturer, Jabil is another contract manufacturer. We help people manage change in their supply chain. So electronics with Moore's Law and all that good stuff, doubling every year and a half, density of chips, slowing down a little bit now, but an order of magnitude change is a whole new product line, so every 5 years, complete sea change in products that people make. They live with a lot of change. Another plant in Mexico, they make 200,000 satellite decoder boxes a week. They get, on average, 34 engineering changes a day. 34. So how do you manage 34 engineering changes a day while making 200,000 units a week? Get them shipped out the door, and some of those changes you have to retrofit because they're more important or whatever. A lot of them are small changes, cost reductions and things like that that you can flush the pipe through. But you've got to turn the hose on, turn this hose off, and keep shifting stuff out the door. So we help them do that. Yeah, big numbers. So electronics is an obvious place that we do a bunch of things. Hubble, you may recognize that name. They make cables and connectors. And you think, well, what's hard about making a HDMI cable? I'd hold one up, but it's plugged in. I don't want to disconnect things. So that's interesting, but that's not the challenge. The reason they use our product is for the automotive business. They make the, I was going to say backplanes. They make the wiring harnesses for cars. And so they have to line up what they make with the particular models that the car makers are pushing down the line that day so that things get delivered in sequence and the right stuff goes into the right car, because you do not want to stop on an automotive assembly line. I put these ones up separate. Turns out we have, or the majority of the world's digital cameras are managed through Rapid Response, our product. So Casio, Olympus, Nikon, the ones that we can talk about. There's others that we aren't allowed to talk about. Then there's a combination here of mostly fabless semiconductor companies that don't have fabrication facilities. So Massimo, onsemi, Schneider covers all kinds of stuff, huge European company. Okay, then automotive. So we have Ford. I can mention it, and Nissan over there, and we announced not too long ago that Toyota signed up with us, which was, we were rather pleased to get them as they're a well-known name in the manufacturing business. We've also got Sikorsky down there. They make helicopters, 6 or 7 a week of the Black Hawk series. And again, helicopters, believe it or not, are quite different, depending on whether it's search and rescue or U.S. military or Canadian or whatever. The avionics is different. The power and configuration and controls are different. They did one for somebody in the Middle East, and they insisted on gold plating on all of the controls. It's nice to have money to burn, I guess. But so everyone is a little different. And how do you make these things? How do you ramp up? How do you ramp down? How do you change? They also, as a U.S. military contractor, are bound by what, DFARS, I guess it's called. So if the U.S. military says to a U.S. company, we need one of these, they have to make it, and they have to make it as fast as they can, or as quickly as they can. So a lot of what Sikorsky uses this for is to figure out when they can slot in this rush order. So you don't want to start a helicopter up and have it on your line waiting for a part, because it kind of gums things up. But by law, they have to make it as soon as they can. So as soon as they figure out we can get all the pieces staged to make it, that's when they start that helicopter, and that's what we help them with. Then there's, ASICS over here. So there's, Santen is a pharmaceutical company, so we got into pharmaceutical and consumer packaged goods, CPG. And ASICS, interestingly, ASICS makes shoes. That is the company. Their manufacturing is quite similar to electronics. A lot of outsourced manufacturing to low-cost labor countries, and then pulling it all together and distributing it around the world. So you wouldn't have thought it, but it's actually, there's quite a bit of commonality there. Alstom makes trains and things like that. Lixil is an interesting one in the middle there. Lixil is a Japanese company. You probably don't know them. One of their brands is American Standard. So they make building supplies. Their reason for coming to us was they wanted to be able to deliver custom windows or doors 3 days after receipt of order. Now, if you've ordered windows or doors here, I'm sure it took more than 3 days to get it shipped to you. So all the extrusions and getting everything lined up, so we help them with that. We've done some cool things. So as I said, we help people manage their supply chains. Well, how do we do it? So Mike Kahi there had the original idea. We were doing chip design at Mitel, and we found a piece of hardware that would do logic simulations 1,000 times faster than we could run on our digital equipment VAX. Now, who knows what DEC is and who knows what a VAX was? Okay, there's a few people. 84, I realized that we started the company before some of you were born, which also strikes me when I do welcome to the company things. So we said, well, I wonder if we could throw hardware at the MRP problem, make it interactive. And so we actually did that. We built a prototype box, and then we built a real box that we sold, and helped Nortel, was our first customer. And then we moved on to Unix, and then in '96 we moved on to Windows and figured out how to make this a true multi-user and what we call multi-scenario, which is our unique shtick, if you want to call it that. So in a database, you put data in and you can take data out and everybody can look to see it, and that's the data, right? In our world, in planning, you want to be able to have one person play with stuff, have a private sandbox. What if? Now, the volumes of data that we deal with, you can see over here, our memory size is increased to 4 terabytes. It's actually 6 now. 6 terabytes of RAM is the memory space that we run in. Like, this is big data. Now, maybe not SAP HANA size or something like that, but that's a lot of stuff, a lot of data. And figuring out how to do a what if in that, if you tried to copy that, which is what some of the competition would do, you need another big box to run it on, and that starts to get impractical pretty soon. So we actually allow users to make changes in the data and then simulate the results of those changes as close to instantaneously as we can do. So our background in real-time systems is really quite handy in this. So we've got good data structures, good engineering, all that stuff to make it run fast. So that was '96. And then '97, we realized that our data server would actually make a great back end to a web service. And so we put up a web service in '97 that was a true database, if you like, application, totally running on the web, which was pretty novel at the time too, I believe. Then we've been very much customer driven. So the rest of these things largely are the result of customer input. So Sikorsky has been a customer for a long time. When the Itaniums came out, the 64-bit platform, 64-bit operating system, they said, building a helicopter with 3 gigs of workable memory that you had under Windows 32 is kind of confining. So as soon as the 64-bit machines came out, they said, you've got to move to 64 bits. And so we did that, and now I guess it's x64s and all the rest of it, but we solved that problem. 2000 and, so that's 2001, 2006, okay, when we were at Mitel, we had our own manufacturing. We even had our own chip fab down in Bromont, Quebec, and we built stuff, right? We had people on the floor building stuff. By about, well, 2006 for sure, the world of contract manufacturing had come in. So electronics companies didn't actually make something unless you were a contract manufacturer. You farmed all that out, you outsourced it all to somebody else. The disadvantage of doing that was that the people managing the supply chain lost control. It used to be I could call up Bill or Mary on the floor and find out where my job was. Now, it might still be Bill or Mary, but they had a different name tag, and their systems were different, and you couldn't just call them up or check on online to see what was going on. So we provided the ability for people to bring their data from all their different suppliers and customers into one place. We built a coherent model of their entire supply chain, all the supplies and demands and lead times and lot sizes, all those rules that are applicable, and gave you one view into the entire supply chain, still with the what-if capability of multiple scenarios. 2006, we also got our software as a service going and went pretty much fully subscription. So we'll talk about that a little bit more. I'll say it now. If you're in this, who's in the software business here? Okay. If you can possibly manage, figure out how to do it, go subscription. Like, don't even think about, it's nice to get that multi-million-dollar order, but what are you going to do January 1st the next year? You got to go sell another one just to stay the same level as you were the year before. If you're on subscription, you can charge well for the annual subscription costs, and then it keeps you honest and it keeps the customer honest. It keeps you honest because they can stop and say, okay, I don't want to get this magazine anymore. I don't want to get the subscription. So if you're not adding value, shame on you, they're going to cut you off. If you keep adding value more than they're paying, then they're going to keep paying you, right? And that keeps you honest and keeps making sure they get value. So, and it means that when you start next year, depending on what your retention rate is, 60, 70, 80% of your last year's revenue is already booked for the next year. It's a lovely way to start the year. See what else we got here. So that's SaaS. Then we started doing demand management. So we added statistical forecasting capabilities so we could look at your historical demands and project out future demands. You have to be really careful in the supply chain, trying to project the future based on the past. I like to say it's like driving down the freeway, or we're still driving the Sea to Sky Highway in Vancouver in the middle of a blizzard when all you got is your rearview mirrors. You've got to be kind of careful and keep second guessing what the numbers are saying, because you will quickly go off the road if you don't. And then we've got, because we run a SaaS service, the certification is really important. So we're talking about sexy marketing, right? SAS 70, SOC 2 Type 2. I mean, does that just make you want to jump up and down and scream and be happy? But anyway, for the people that care about it in the security business, that's good stuff. Better than most of our customers do internally, if they bother to get the standards. 2009, good story here. I mentioned that we like to be customer-centric. So one of our customers, still is, makes electronic test equipment. They had a facility out in Agora Hills, which is just north of LA in California. And they decided they were going to move some of the production to China, and the balance they were going to move back to their head office in the Boston area. And so there were a bunch of people who were using rapid response out there that were looking for a job. So several of them landed up at a company in Thousand Oaks called, oh, I can't say the name because they're not on my list. A pharmaceutical company, I'm sorry. And they got there and they said, why aren't you using rapid response? And they said, never heard of it. And Steve mentioned we were under the radar. Well, sometimes that doesn't work to your advantage. So they called us up and they said, hey, we're at this pharmaceutical company and we think you should come in and sell it and deliver it to us. And we said, pharmaceutical? We don't do pharmaceutical. and that raised a whole debate. So do you stick to your enabling high-tech electronics, aerospace, and defense, or do you take a flyer on a new industry? On the other side, if you don't take a flyer on a new industry, does that just encourage them, now that they think it's possible, to go find somebody who would do it for them, not us? And so do you create your competition, or do you risk killing yourself by taking on more than you can chew? Or do you make sure it works? So we took the third choice. We did a prototype with them first of all and say, okay, what do we know about the pharma business? How is it different from electronics and stuff like that? Well, there's a few things that are different. The biggest one that we were aware of right away was when I put this on the shelf, I can sell it next month, next year, and if anybody's foolish enough to want to buy an iPhone 8 2 years after it was built, it still works and they can buy it, right? When I put a drug product on the shelf, sometimes as little as 2 months, I can't sell it anymore because of regulations. Plus, we learned that the regulations are different by country. So Japan tends to have the most stringent expiry or product life cycle requirements. Brazil and some of the South American countries tend to have much longer. And that can be literally 6 months to 2 years is the range. Now, is the product any less safe or less viable after a year and a half? Probably not, but that's how the regulations work. Anyway, so we knew about that. The other thing is that they said, well, it takes us a long time to ramp up a new reactor line to make new drug products. And so we plan out 10 years. Now, I mentioned Moore's Law earlier, electronics. The reality is any guesses to forecast demand beyond about 3 months is a wild-ass guess. So that was quite different. Turned out we could handle the 10 years, that was fine. We figured out how to handle the expiration logic, and we put that in. The pilot was a success, and they've been a great customer ever since. And we've sold into many other pharmaceutical companies, which then got us into consumer packaged goods. So some of the pharma companies have, they make hairspray or soaps or whatever as well, and so that kind of is CPG. And then once you're doing CPG, you showed us another company that doesn't do the pharma, that we do CPG, and now you're into CPG, right? We got some patents. That in itself is an interesting exercise. The first one that was issued in 2009, I wrote the application for that in 2002, so only 7 years to get a software patent. And I don't think they're any faster now. That's US patents, and then you take it to other jurisdictions and things like that. 2011, we started selling what we call control towers. So we said, you've got your entire supply chain in our world, and it's all connected. So not only can you use it for planning and figuring out what my supplies need to be and things like that, not only can you use it for collaborative demand planning, where people look at your stat forecasts and your human-entered forecasts and do adjustments and come up with a forecast that they want to live with, but you've got the near-in stuff too. So, for example, when an earthquake hits Indonesian island, I don't think there's a lot of manufacturing there, but when the tsunami hit Malaysia, that was a real problem because most of the world's small disk drives are made in Malaysia, it turns out. So if you needed small disk drives and Malaysia got wiped out, which it did, what are you going to do? You're going to stop selling products for 6 months? Or you're going to find out where else you can get them. So people who had rapid response were able to, like within minutes to hours, figure out exactly what they were going to need, contacted secondary sources, locked up their supply for the next year, and they were happy. The customers or the companies that didn't have rapid response, they called them up and said, sorry, our capacity is booked for the next year, you'll have to go someplace else. So you either don't get it at all or you pay a lot more for it, neither of which is terribly attractive. I'll skip a few here. We got into the automotive market. It was a similar thing. Ford came to us and said, we think you can help us here. And we said, let's talk about how your data works and let's see your bill of materials. Now, bill of materials is the recipe of how you make one of these things, right? And multiple layers and things like that. Well, the automotive business doesn't talk about bills of materials. They talk about feature option lists. So when you go to the dealer, you say, I want a blue Ford 150 with the crew cab and these options on it. that ultimately translates into bits and pieces that get put into the vehicle, but they don't call it a bill of material. So we had to get past this nomenclature problem and add a few more bits of functionality to the product. And again, the trial went well, and they've been a customer ever since, and now we're selling to several automotive companies. Memory size, so I mentioned 3 gigabytes. So Windows 32 total address space was 4 gigs. A gig was reserved for the operating system, left 3 for applications like us to run on. And so that was where we were. And now with the x64s and the bigger boxes, we're 4/6 terabytes of RAM that we use for our process, plus a bunch of disks behind it. So that's kind of cool. And there are some companies like Schneider that's telling us for my 43 plants around the world, that's really not quite enough. So we'll keep growing that. Then we've done some interesting technical things. So vector storage is, we worry about performance, like how fast it runs and how much memory. Even though we've got 4 terabytes, it's never enough. We want to figure out how to shrink down how much memory we need. So vector storage is a way for us to store the data such that we can get at it faster and store more information in the same amount of space. 2015, we also did some things with mobile. So you can use rapid response from your laptop, from your desktop, from your cell phone, and the displays that you see automatically morph themselves depending on how big the window is that you're working in. Many of our customers, like I'd say most of them, run SAP. So this one, getting a certified SAP extraction tool was really a big deal for us, to say to our customers, yes, we're certified by SAP that we can pull your data out safely and securely. That's a big thing. Now this year we've started, actually end of last year, we started looking at machine learning, and we've actually released a product which we call the self-healing supply chain, which looks at historical supply data and monitors the lead times that have been seen in the data versus the lead times that you have in your data for planning purposes, and automatically or semi-automatically or manual intervention, because nobody trusts the machine, you can update these things and keep your data more current, which results in better planning and better execution in your supply chain. We did an IPO in 2014, and that same year Gartner, which is an analyst, put us in their Magic Quadrant, and actually put us in the leader's position of the Magic Quadrant, which was a very nice place to be. And that stimulated people actually calling us to say, tell us what you can do for us, rather than our people having to cold call into companies all the time. So that's a bit of the history. I should have talked a little bit more about the hardware. So it was a big box, 2 19-inch racks, little boxes in each one of them. We designed the cards that went into it, plus the software that went into it. And there was actually more memory and more computing horsepower in that box than in the IBM mainframes at the time. That's why we had to build our own, is because even the largest mainframes you could get didn't have enough capacity to handle the problems that we were doing without using a disk. So, Kinaxis. All we've ever wanted to do was revolutionize planning. Like, this little company up on the edge of the tundra in Ottawa wanted to apply some new engineering, or proper engineering, I'll say, to a business problem, in this case, planning your supply chain. So that's, that from the very beginning, that's been what we've done. It's morphed a lot, as you've seen from the advances we've made, but that's still what we do. And our values, customer-centric, curious, learn, innovate. And I'll say this in this group, I say this to new employees as well, the adventurous in communication. So people are really good at saying, I had this wonderful idea and I tried it out and it worked so well. I'm so smart. This is good stuff. People tend to be a lot quieter when things didn't work the way they expected. The thing is that the best way to learn something, the best way to make progress is a binary search. That means half your experiments shouldn't work out the way you expected. Notice I did not say fail. They do not work out the way you expected. When something doesn't work out the way you expect it, Celebrate that. Communicate it. Because you had a great idea, the person beside you might well have exactly the same great idea, and if you didn't tell them it didn't work, they're going to waste their time doing exactly the same thing you did, and you still don't know anything more than you did before. So communicate the learning opportunities or the surprises as much as you communicate successes. We've always tried very hard to be real, respectful, integrity, people first. Again, looking at Mike's theory for hiring people was really simple: bright as hell, industrious, and nice to live with. Well, nice to work with, I guess. Now, you have to be careful what you say now, right? And really, that fits in very well with these, rewritten values, I'll say. So respect yourself, colleagues, partners, customers. I'm on a great ride. I mean, this has been and continues to be, I still do work for Kinaxis, continues to be a great ride. I get to work with great people in the company and outside the company. There's always a few people you'd really rather not have to deal with, but the vast majority of the people that I run into inside and outside the company are really good people. They're smart, they work hard, and they're nice to be with. And you know, we don't necessarily socialize a lot outside of work hours, but you can get along well while you're working, and you know everybody's working for the same goal. It really makes it very nice and very rewarding. I also tell people that, well, we laugh around the table, some of us who have been there a long time. We probably wouldn't hire ourselves now. We wouldn't have made the cut. So anybody that we do hire, everybody we hire, you got to recognize that they're there for a reason. And even if you don't agree with what somebody's saying, they're not stupid whatevers or fools or whatevers. They probably have a good reason, so give them the time to explain what it is they're looking for, or why they disagree with you, why they have a differing opinion. Usually when the facts are out on the table, it's amazing how coherent people can be. And self-empowered, take risks, make it happen, and have fun. So that's what we try to do. So the company gave me this, I think, at 25 years after we started the company. And it's, you'll notice this fellow in this very nice polyester suit here. That's when we were, well, back there we are signing incorporation papers. So this was 1984 at the Rideau Club. Who here has been to the Rideau Club? Oh, quite a few. Good. So you know it's a very, very nice place to have a meeting. And so we signed the incorporation papers there. Delobe Pane, who is here, these pictures are not very clear, was our lawyer and advisor at the time. And unfortunately, he's passed away, which is the disadvantage of being in the business for 34 years. He was a member at the Rideau Club, and that's why we were there. This is Michael here, and that's John Peacock, the other founder there. This is the hardware we built. It turned out that the first trade show we went to was in Toronto, even though our market is largely in the States. And so we were able to put this on display, and we had some actors there. We had some fun with it even then. We had some actors who, we still run into them occasionally. They're doing things like the Chipmunks, and they're doing different shows around that you'll see. And oh, I know that name. That was this guy right here. He was pretending to be a master scheduler at a manufacturing company in our little thing. And 5-minute MRP. Okay. Material requirements planning, for those of you who don't know. I should also point out, while I'm seeing him, Gavin McClintock is here. You can hold your hand up too. He was also one of our early advisors. We had a lot of great community support. Al Buchanan, who I guess has also passed away, from Lemonix, who remembers Lemonix. Make sure I've got a list of people here. So yeah, Mike, John, and myself. Alan Castledine managed to find us some money. Noranda, Doug Cameron, Richard Charlebois, Harbor Vest out of Boston, Rob Wadsworth, Technocap out of Montreal, Innovation Ontario. I don't think they are running still, are they? They gave us some money, which was very helpful at the time. I mentioned Gavin, Al Buchanan, Eric Manning from Waterloo, Delobe, I mentioned him, Peter Bowie from Deloitte's, thank you. Kalian, Larry O'Brien, Digital Equipment, Denny Doyle helped us out. Also Cognos, Mike Potter was very helpful. They let us into their computer room between 11 o'clock at night and 6 in the morning. We got to bring our box in, plug it into their HP 3000, run our stuff all night, and pick up our skirts and be out the door again by 6 in the morning when their IT staff came in. Those were the days. And if you were really lucky, you got to drive to Toronto that afternoon. We did that many times. Nortel and Gandalf, when we were in Cognos, it was Gandalf's data that we were using. Who remembers Gandalf? Okay, good. There's a few old timers here. They made statistical multiplexers and things like that before Ethernet existed, they were pretty standard for a while. Anyway, it was their data that we used in the Cognos Computing Center. And let's see, what else? Legal, we had Perley's and LaBarge Weinstein. Accountants, Deloitte's, Ken Charbonneau. I haven't seen him today. I haven't seen him for a long time, actually. Our bankers, Royal Bank, Jim Blattman and Christine McCready, were very patient, we'll say, because not only did it take us 30 years of hard slogging, the banks had to ride with us, and there were some tough spells in there when making payroll was a challenge, we'll say. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. Insurance, landlords, and all that other good stuff. I should also say, so we talked here about founding the company. We started the company with, I believe it was $330,000 for friends and family round. I probably know a little bit more about Canadian Securities Commission than I should, but it's probably also somewhat out of date. But fewer than 50 external shareholders, and you could raise money not publicly but privately. I think that was the rule. So for quite a while, we were very careful about making sure, see, we're at 46 external shareholders. We can't take more than 4 more or we're offside and that sort of stuff. Then we raised some money from Noranda, we raised some money from Technocap and HarborVest and other investors, and then we did the IPO in 2014. So amazing what you could do in those days with $330,000. Like, that's not very much now when you hear people, well, we're doing 100 million first round and we'll see where that takes us, right? US. Yeah. Here's some pictures of some circuit cards and schematics and things like that. And some of the early pictures of some of the people. We like to play soccer, so that soccer ball was a big aspect of what we did to let off steam, I guess. And traveled the world. There's Korea. I can relate an interesting story, sales call to Korea with Don Ham, who is Korean, and haven't seen him here today either. I think he still lives in Ottawa. And we were over there, and I would say something, and then Don would translate it into Korean, and we had the slides up. And then the questions started, and they started asking questions, and I guess we did 6 or 7 of these presentations during the course of the week. And by the time we got to like halfway through them, there's enough English sprinkled in amongst the Korean, you sort of know what they're saying, so I didn't even bother for Don to translate the questions. I'd say, okay, I think you're asking about how a planner would do this. Is that right? And Don would say, and yes, okay. Well, this is what they do. And they all thought I spoke Korean. It was the strangest thing. So that was sort of fun. Let's see, what else have we got here? I'd also say, I talked about our accountants and the bank. Mike's philosophy from the very beginning had always been run the company like a public company. So we did monthly financials. We didn't get them audited. Well, we got them audited annually. We didn't get them audited quarterly, but we ran it as if we were being audited. We kept very close look on cash. I'll say it again, but cash is king. Who's heard that expression? Yeah, okay. When you have it, it's the time to get more, and when you don't have it, you're in trouble. Okay, I'll say it. When you're getting investment in, be really careful, because the investors love to play games. So they will argue, negotiate, and get the price they want. And then once the price is settled, they go dead quiet. because they're waiting for the risk to go down. They want you to make the next 3 sales. They want you to do this to the point where they know they can put the money in and not lose it. So when you really need it is when they won't give it to you. And they're going to try to wait you out. And then if things don't go exactly as planned, or even if they do, they'll say, well, yes, we can give you a little bit less for the same percentage of the company, or we can lower the price, and all these things. Like, it's a rough game. I mean, it's their money, I understand, but just be aware of that. Yeah, certainly we got into the most trouble as a company when we thought we had investment coming in, and we were sure it was coming in, and so we started spending because we were sure it was coming in. It didn't come in, and then it was not fun. What can I say? Okay. Yeah, so great community of people helping us out, both advice and funding. And I'm happy to say that for us at least, if they were very patient, they actually have come out nicely on the deal. So that's all good. But I also recognize that a lot of startups don't work out so nicely. So at 1 in 10 is a good success. 1 more in 10 at least breaks even, and the other 8 don't pay back anything, basically, right? So I can understand investors being reticent to come up with their cash. Okay. So I've talked about some of these things. I should stop. Anybody have any questions to this point? Yeah.
Startups are a white knuckle ride on the best of days. I get that.
Sorry, say that again?
Startups are a
Oh,
white knuckle
yes,
ride
yes,
on the best of days.
yes.
When did you guys know? When did you guys know that you could turn to your wives and say, "We got a business," or "Your significant other, we got a business"? What was the tipping point? Did you recognize it?
Well, I should. You raised a great point. First of all, thank you for that. The question is, when did we know we were going to be successful? And you mentioned wives and things like that. So, in my case, my wife was a school teacher, and so we sat down when we started the company. Michael came to me one day in the hallways at Mitel and said, "Duncan, I have this idea. What do you think?" And I thought, hey, that sounds like fun. I think that's pretty much what I said. And I went home to my wife and said, "Marion, Michael suggested we should start a company. You know, here's how it's going to work. We're going to take a cut in pay. In fact, we're not going to get paid anything for the next while. We're going to live off your salary." Fortunately, I have a Scottish background, Robert Duncan Klett. So living frugally wasn't so strange. And she was a school teacher. So we made do and what we could make go with, right, as it were. And she was very supportive. So I think she knew I was having fun. So that was good. So when did we know we were going to be successful? About 2012. How many years did we go? We're going to go public in 2 years. For about 30 years, right? Our initial business plan, which we wrote late evenings, you get good at working at night and then coming into the office in the morning and working all day. And I had a young daughter, like a baby at the time. Oh, Carmen was awake last night, I guess. Well, she was, but Marion was looking after her. I was with Michael and John, and we were running a business plan. But yeah, so no, we could see sometime before 2012 that we were getting customers and we were becoming profitable. The subscription business was working around about then, but it was surprisingly a long time before we were profitable and we could see it really starting to work.
So was there a customer that made that happen? Was it an industry that you went into?
Not an individual customer. It was just getting enough of them. I think the big change, really, we had some profitable years and then we'd have a not so profitable year, loss. When we got on the SaaS business, the subscription business, that first year was hard because we're used to selling, in those days, 4 or 5 deals at $1 million a crack. That was your revenue for the year. And you go to subscription and your total revenue for the year was $1.5 million. That's kind of hard to swallow. On the other hand, it was a lot easier for us to swallow it than it was for an SAP or an Oracle or something like that to take that kind of cut as a public company, right? And so we swallowed hard and we sold more. The second year was kind of nice though, because now we had $2 million in revenue already booked, and anything we sold new got added to that. And so that started, then we started getting profitable years, stringing profitable years, profitable quarters together, and you get some predictability to it, and yeah, you start to feel a little bit better. Does that answer the question? Mostly, it wasn't a particular time when I said, "Oh my God, this is working."
Question.
Yeah.
When did you were able to pay yourself? You said, hey,
Well, we did actually pay ourselves. About half of what we'd been making. I think that's what it was.
in how long?
Oh well, we actually paid out of that $330,000. We paid ourselves for the next 6 months. Yeah, Michael.
And we never missed payroll.
We never missed payroll. Sometimes it was hellishly tight, but we never missed payroll. That's right. Yeah.
I worked with the IRAP program, and one of the big discussions we always had with the IRAP program was the need for patient capital. And I'm just wondering, where did that patient capital come from?
Well, as I said, our friends and family round were very patient. They waited 30 years to be able to get their money out. That's patience.
Your timeline is really very striking to me, because we were talking about patient capital, sort of expanding it from 1 year to 5 years or something like that, but we were really talking here, we're talking
Decades.
20 and something.
Yeah. Well, maybe ours was slower. Maybe we could have done things differently to go faster. Yeah, Michael, I'll let you
We
comment.
got lucky with Miranda and Dougie Cameron.
Yes. Yeah, they were very patient.
Absolutely the right
Yes.
prices.
Yes. First class investors. I presume Doug is he passed? I presume he must have. Doug, he's, oh, I'm glad to hear that he's out.
We won't tell him last.
What's that?
We won't tell him last.
No, okay, yeah, thank you. Yeah, yeah, very patient money, and good advice through the process as well. Yeah. So yeah, patient money. My personal view, and I should have said this at the beginning, as I said, I don't have anything to do with the financial operations of the company. My comments here are mine. They don't necessarily reflect the board or the president or anything else of the company now. Yeah.
But I had one more, I'm sorry to interrupt, but Jim Blackman at the Royal was.
It was also very patient, yes.
Jim could have played, you know.
He could have played hardball with us and killed us, absolutely.
He let us go.
Yeah, he did. Yeah, another question in the back.
Sorry, can I,
Oh.
why don't we save the questions till the end and
Oh.
get the microphone for the back?
Oh, okay, that's great,
We'll leave
okay.
the video.
Good, okay, yeah, we're almost done anyway. So, first rule of business, as I said, is stay in business. It's like if you're not in business, you're not in business. So cash is king, and of course, you earn being in business by providing a unique value. I've said to my kids, you can do anything you want. You can do exactly what you want, provided that it lets you live the lifestyle you want. And depending on what it takes to finance that lifestyle, you may have to be the very best in your marketplace, which might be the best on the block, it might be the best in the province, it might be the best in the continent, it might be the best in the world, whatever your business is. But you get that balance, you can do anything you want. You just have to provide a unique value. And the focus with balance, I've talked about that a little bit already. You know, stick to your knitting. On the other hand, opportunities come along. You have to decide, do I jump or do I not jump? It's usually pretty binary. And we've talked about the community, my wife, personal, employees and external. Really helpful to have people that you can bounce ideas off of, and they say, well, you know, if you do that, you got to be worried about this, this, and this, or even just the straight business things like, you know, what have you got for insurance? Who's your bank manager? Let me introduce you to Jim Blattman. And off you go, right? Seek advice, but advice is advice. You've got to trust your instincts too. If something doesn't feel right or smell right to you, it's probably not the right thing to do. Or at least question the person who's giving the advice and say, what about, what about, what about? Which comes down to, I don't think I said it here, ask questions. If you don't understand something, it's not your fault for being stupid. It's the person trying to tell you something's fault for not explaining it to you properly. That's my theory anyway. So ask ask again. I don't get it. Why do you say this? What's the answer to this? Like, and sometimes they're just trying to take your money, and that's when you ask the questions, it becomes pretty obvious. Other times, you may learn something and say, oh, I hadn't thought of that. Now I get it. You're absolutely right. Or, you know, it was close, but what about this? And then maybe, you, as I said earlier, once you understand all the facts, you both say, well, this is the way we should be going. So ask questions. Perseverance pays, at least it has in our case. As I said, it continues to be a fun ride. And better love what you're doing, because you're going to spend a lot of time doing it. And I believe that's it. So now we can have the questions.